Hi and welcome to A Positive Light. I am your host, Joni Lane, and we're here every Monday at 3 o'clock on LCM TV. So thank you LCM TV for having us. The show is basically about how to help you be happier and feel better and deal with life on life's terms. I try to present different ideas on how to do meditations that might help you deal with stress and tension of just everyday occurrences. Sometimes big things happen to us, and it's nice to be prepared and know how to deal with them by practicing when we just have the mundane things happen to us. So I try to promote meditation for that. Meditation is a form of relaxation that helps retrain our mind how to think differently, how to react to life differently. Many times some of us will drink or take drugs or do a lot of any number of things, smoke, just to relieve the stress that we're under every day, because life can be very stressful. But life is pretty good too. And so in order to really experience the good stuff too, as deeply as we can, meditation really helps with that, because it helps us live in the moments that are wonderful, and it helps teach us how to deal with the moments that are a little trying, or sometimes a lot trying. So LCM TV has allowed me to have this show every week, and I try to give you different ideas, but I am open to your ideas too. So if you have a suggestion or something you'd like to talk about, if you know somebody that has a positive message, or if you have a positive message and you'd like to be a guest, please let me know. Please call me or email me, and let's discuss how we can either have your ideas on the show or have you or a guest on the show. My contact information will be coming up throughout the show today on the screen, so you have plenty of time to make a note of that. The music you were listening to is done by my friend Sam Houston, who is a very talented musician, lives in Sonoma County with his beautiful wife, Karen. Lovely music, great music to meditate to. You can find his CDs online at samhouston.com. That's E-U-S-T-O-N, Houston. And his history is on that website as well. So check out Sam's website, samhouston.com. We hold meditations every Monday night at 7 o'clock at our nonprofit, A Positive Light in Kelseyville. Tonight, however, which is Monday night, we are not going to be holding a meditation, one of the rare times that we don't, because I'm going to see my favorite band, 62 Blues, playing at the Blue Wing tonight. But normally, Mondays at 7 o'clock, we have meditation. There's no cost. And then the second Tuesday of every month, I hold a 12 in Zen, which is also no cost and is also at 7 o'clock. I try to hold most of my groups at 7 p.m. because that way we only have to remember one time, and I try to keep it simple so we don't have to think about too many things. The 12 in Zen is based on a book by Bill Crumbeen, which you can look into and buy that online. There's an ebook or paperback on Amazon.com. If you'd like to be a sponsor of the show, we would love to promote what you have while you support us. So if you're interested in sponsoring, having a commercial on the show, give me a call, give me an email, and we can keep the price as low as $40 a month for some really fabulous advertising. So consider that as well. I am also a Reiki master teacher, and I teach Reiki, which is Japanese energy work. Reiki meaning universal energy. I have level, level 1, level 2, master and teacher. And I really enjoy teaching that because it's very powerful and people really benefit from it. It's very similar to Qigong, which is Chinese energy work, but this is concentrated on our bodies and ourselves. So that's a very simple explanation to something that's very powerful, but I'd love to share it with you. If you're interested in learning Reiki, let me know as well. On the last Friday of every month, I hold a Reiki Healing Circle where I give Reiki to 8 to 10 people that come and visit. 2 hours of Reiki healing, and it's very powerful energy. The class fills up quickly because people really enjoy it. And once they are finished with the class, normally they run over and sign up for the next one, so the class fills up very quickly. I'd love to share that with you as well, and if I have enough people that are interested, I can always add another class. But for now, it's the last Friday of every month. The next one being October 30th from 7 to 9. And we do ask for a $10 donation for that group. So let me know if you're interested in joining me for that group, and I can put your name on the list and hold the spot for you. On November 8th, we will be hosting Kevin Griffin. He will be giving us a day-long workshop. Kevin is an author of One Breath at a Time, A Burning Desire, and his newest book, Recovering Joy. And this day-long will focus on ways to bring a light heart and clear mind to our recovery program. We'll explore ways to cultivate joy using traditional Buddhist mindfulness teachings, 12-step teachings, and contemporary practices for increasing happiness and contentment. Kevin is one of the leaders in the mindfulness recovery movement, one of the founders of the Buddhist Recovery Network, a longtime Buddhist practitioner and 12-step participant. He teaches nationally on the synthesis of these two traditions. So I hope you can join us for this very insightful class on November 8th. Please let me know as soon as you can that you're interested in holding a spot. It's only $50. Kevin teaches internationally, all over the world, to thousands of people, and actually has to charge a bit more than $50, but he is keeping his prices low for us. So we're very fortunate to have him back teaching a new day-long workshop. On my website at positivelight.com, on the calendar page, I do have a PayPal button there specifically for Kevin's class to make it easier for you to reserve your space. So you can go to the PayPal button and it automatically notifies me that you've reserved a space, and I can have your name on the list. If you have any questions regarding any of these things I just spoke about, please contact me, email me, call me, and I'll be happy to go over any and all of it, answer as many questions as I can. So the last few weeks we've been talking about various different kinds of mindfulness. Last week I talked specifically about my recovery program, 26 years of being clean and sober, and 26 years of doing meditation. And I've gone through a lot of teaching. I've had many monks and many various teachers from Burma, Bali, Vietnam, all over the world, teaching me various kinds of meditation and various philosophies. Not just one kind. I really am interested in learning as many philosophies as I can, and it's not just Buddhism. I try to understand all religions, and there's a lot of religions, so I haven't been exposed to all of them, but I am interested in learning all of them, because so far, in the hundreds that I've read about, and the hundreds of teachers that I've had, there are so many similarities that it's pretty much, I think we can all agree, for the most part, that religions, as long as they're positive, are pretty much all the same. We all want to help each other. We all want to take care of each other and love each other and make the world a better place. It's very hard to do because we're human and we have emotions, and we're often run by our emotions. One of the things I was thinking about over this past week, after I talked about last week's 12 and Zen and how it's similar between Buddhism and the 12 steps, they have all these similarities. I was thinking about people in general in the recovery programs. Now, traditional AA steps, the 12 steps, has been used in hundreds, maybe thousands of other recovery programs. Overeaters Anonymous, Gambling Anonymous, Sex Addiction, Narcotics Anonymous. There's just so many to name. but they're all based on 12 steps because they're so successful. They really work. If we work the steps, they work. And some of the things I was thinking regarding the recovering people is that there's a lot of similarities in people that are in recovery. We all kind of have the same issues. And it's not just recovering people, but I'd say more so. Often we don't relate to the world the same way other people do. And I think that's true generally of everyone, but there's specifics. And I know one of the things that specifically about recovering people that's different is that we don't tend to listen to other people. We already think we know everything. And we have a really hard time being wrong. We have to be right. Another trait that I've noticed from people that are not open to learning more about themselves is that they talk a lot. Now, we have all known people, or maybe we've been told that we talk too much. And it's an important piece of information. In my experience as a meditation teacher, most of the people who tell me that they've been told they talk too much are also the people who tell me that they have a difficult time being at peace and meditating. There's too much thought going on. Can't do it. Can't sit still with myself. So if you're one of those who's been told you talk too much, some questions you might ask yourself are, why do you talk so much? It's a very important question to really look at. Are you saying something that's important? Or are you just filling space because you have a hard time sitting in silence and silence is uncomfortable? If that's the truth, then why is silence uncomfortable? What is it that makes it hard for you to sit in silence? Why do you feel you need to fill that up with speaking? Are you really overly talkative when you're in a group of people? Or do you constantly need to have noise in the background when you're alone? Do you need the TV on? Do you need to have music? Is it difficult for you to live alone and be quiet? Because a lot of times, if you look at it, this is a really important piece of information. If you look at that, and it is difficult for you to sit comfortably in silence, often that tells you that there's something uncomfortable about sitting with you. And the saying goes, it's a sad man who can't live in his own skin, is telling you a lot. There is quite a bit to that phrase. If you have a hard time sitting with yourself, how can you relate to other people and the honesty of the world, the truth in every day, the truth in every moment? I think these are really important questions because if you find it's difficult to sit in silence, especially in a group, you may be someone who is trying to avoid yourself. And if you're trying to avoid yourself, then there's a lot to discover about yourself and your behavior toward yourself. So keep in mind that when I say, if you're someone who's been told you talk too much, this is not a criticism. It's just a very important piece of information, a very important piece of information that can be looked at as a stepping stone for your growth. So if you look at why you don't want to sit quietly, why do you need to have distraction and noise? If you're sitting next to someone and there's just the two of you in a room, can you sit there quietly and be comfortable? Or do you need to fill it in with talking? Something to really look at. When we start looking at things like that, I think a door opens up to our own personal growth and our own self-awareness. You know, instead of criticizing yourself or feeling defensive because someone has said you talk too much, maybe this is an important piece of information that you can use to look at yourself and think, maybe there is something I'm avoiding. Maybe there is a reason I don't like to be quiet while I sit next to someone. Why is it uncomfortable? This opening to the self-awareness of why it's uncomfortable is a really important clue to what we need to look at. And a big part of it is the ego. I notice with most recovering people, whether they're recovering from alcoholism or any other addiction, it's ego. Their ego has a lot to do with sitting comfortably with yourself, having to be right, needing to have the last word. It's a lot about ego. And the ego has a lot to do with the mind chatter that goes on. So if you've tried meditation and you're one of those people that says, you know, I just can't sit still, my mind won't be quiet. A lot of times there's a reason your mind is chattering away. For one thing, it's become a habit, and it just happens naturally after a while. But where it originated from, where it originally came from, is something we might want to hunt down. Why do I do this? Why do I need to fill in the quiet? Why can't I just sit quietly and be comfortable with that? And again, I'm not criticizing and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm saying it's a really good indication that there's something that maybe you might want to look at. Maybe there's something you're avoiding that you don't know how to deal with. But meditation can help you learn how to deal with it. So there's the catch-22. If your mind is chattering away and you want to meditate because you want to learn how to deal with the mind chattering away, it's kind of hard to do. Mindfulness meditation is a wonderful introduction to seeing who you truly are, seeing how you can sort things out, one step at a time, a little teeny bit at a time. A lot of the other problems that recovering people have is that they want instant gratification, they want instant answers, and they want things done right away. Well, if I just know this, this, and this, and I can put it together and I can do this. But in meditation, learning to sit quietly with yourself and to be comfortable with who you are and to accept the world as the world is and to look at life on life's terms and accept them, that's a lot of work. It doesn't just happen. Mindfulness is a way to begin the process, to quiet yourself down, to slow down, look at one thing. If your mind starts to chatter, come back to your breath and let it go, let the thoughts go. You're retraining your mind into a new habit, into being quiet, into not filling in the gaps. After a while, you'll start to see things more clearly. You'll have a deeper understanding of what's true. You'll be able to look at life and accept it more easily for what it is, not for what you want it to be. So mindfulness meditation is a very powerful tool for many things. There are a lot of layers that go with addiction. There's so many things that go with addiction that I'm not going to list them all, but some of them have to do with maybe early childhood trauma. Maybe you have a chemical imbalance and you suffer with depression. Maybe it's you feel unsatisfied because you don't have a direction, because you didn't learn how to proceed in life step by step as life comes to you. Maybe it's all of those things. Maybe it's a combination of 100 of other things. But I think what it comes down to is most people who are fighting life and not accepting it are doing that with their ego, and their ego is getting in their way. So when I talk about ego, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with ego. We all have ego, but there's a healthy balance that we need to find. We need to be able to admit we're wrong and promptly admit it. That's a hard one to do, but it's a practice. It's the 10th step in the 12 steps. It's a discipline. It's learning to accept life on life's terms. So in meditation, there's a state of stillness that has to happen, and that can take some getting used to, because if we're so used to our mind chattering away, when we sit in the quiet, it takes a lot to get used to that. There's this discomfort that comes with it. It's something new. It's something we're not used to. So when we're used to have a chattering mind and filling everything in with our talking and not making any, we're not making a point, we're just talking. We get so used to that constant noise that we are unable to sit in the silence and just listen to the silence and just listen to our breath. It's very uncomfortable. And especially in a large gathering, if you're in a group of people, it's really difficult to not talk. I love to sit quietly and just watch people and observe people and not judge them, not have any judgment about it, but just the practice, just being there, listening and learning and being open and not talking. It's a different way of doing it if you're not used to doing it. It's a very good practice to start. So that lack of control that you might feel from the lack of chatter is something that's really good to sit in. If it's really uncomfortable, I would suggest you really sit in that discomfort for a while. Just get used to it. Being present in that discomfort can really help you understand a lot of things that you may not. Things may come to you that answer the question of why can't I sit in silence if you force yourself to do it. If it starts feeling really uncomfortable and you start looking around at the group of people you're meditating with and you start thinking, oh, I'm not meditating as well as that person is, or oh, I'm doing a better job than this person is. You got to look at that stuff. And you got to wonder why your ego is doing that. Why do you need to be better? Or why do you think you're not as good? Ego has a huge, huge amount to do with our success in our recovery program. So, looking at my notes here so I can keep myself on track. Last week I talked about addiction recovery and specifically the similarities between the traditional AA steps and Buddhism. And the one thing I found over the last 26 years of being clean and sober is that my ego has a great deal to do with whether I'm happy or not. And I wrote that down so that I would not forget to say it, because it's important for you to know that I struggle with my ego just as much as anyone else does. And I've been meditating a long time, as I said. I've had a lot of teachings, but a lot of instructions. I've had a lot of sitting for hours in meditation with my teacher staring at me, making me uncomfortable. But I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about my ego. I learned a lot about what's important, what's not important. I can fail, if that's what you want to call it. I can make mistakes. I can have a really noisy mind sometimes. But just know that it's okay that day. Not judge myself for it. Try again the next day or the next hour. So the Buddhism and the 12-step work has a lot to do with leaving your ego at the door. If you are a recovering alcoholic, you'll hear that a lot in meetings. Leaving your ego at the door. The 12th step in the AA Big Book is all about sharing what we learned from the 12 steps and staying sober and living life on life's terms, and sharing that with other alcoholics in order to help them. Buddhist teachings teach not to ingest any intoxicants. And by looking at things as they truly are without running away by using the mind-altering substances, we learn to accept the truth and accept life on life's terms, just like in AA. So part of what I talked about earlier was the 12 in Zen by Bill Crumbeen, and how it works. We have up on the screen now step 1. And one thing I want to mention too, since we are looking at the graphic here, is that on step 1, there's the traditional AA. And the traditional AA step of step 1 is I admitted I was powerless over alcohol, that my life had become unmanageable. Now, since Bill Crumbeen, who wrote the book, has expanded his knowledge out to different people, he's been working with Roshi Bernie Glassman, who's also written Zen Practitioner 12 Steps. I admitted I was powerless over my attachments to my ego and not in control of my actions. And then Herb Echo Deer, who wrote Societal Normal 12 Steps, admitted we have issues and we are unhappy because of them. So what normally we would do in our 12-step or 12 in Zen on a second Tuesday of every month is to look at these 3 versions of step 1 and read them several times until we find one that we personally can relate to. So just because, for no any reason at all, I'm going to pick Zen Practitioner. I admitted I was powerless over my actions to my ego and not in control of my actions. If I meditate just on this step and the way it's written, various things will come up. Let's say I'm repeating it over and over and over in my mind, doing the meditation. I admitted I was powerless over my attachments to my ego and not in control of my actions. I admitted I was powerless. That statement right there may stick with you. Maybe you might read that after a few times, you go, wow, admitted I was powerless. First of all, admitting something. Admitting means you have to admit that maybe you were wrong. Admitting I was powerless. That's very humbling, to admit you're powerless over anything. Admitted I was powerless over my attachments to my ego. Wow, I guess I might have attachments to my ego. Maybe you find that you have to be right all the time, or I just can't be wrong, or I always have to have the last word. Those are all about my ego. Now, if I have to admit I'm powerless over my attachment to my ego, then I'm not in control of my actions. The actions are just there. Wow, my ego is controlling me. I am not controlling it. So you can see during a meditation on this one particular step in this version, admitted I was powerless over my attachment to my ego and not in control of my actions. Meditating on this for 5 minutes, you can really start feeling what this means. You can really start seeing things, your own version of it, of course, very clearly, what it means to you to not be in control of your actions because your ego is controlling you. And you can't admit it. Sometimes it's just so hard to admit you're powerless over this because it makes you feel weak, or it makes you look weak to others, and you just can't handle being weak. Well, there's a lot in this one statement. I admitted I was powerless over my attachment to my ego, and then I'm not in control of my actions. Huge, humbling experience to actually admit that, accept it, and to look at it for what it is. Without judgment, without cutting yourself down, just looking at the fact of it, that we are all attached to our egos to some degree, and in some degree we are not in control of our actions. Now, we're going to take a break, and I'm going to come back to this because there's a little bit more I want to talk to you about when we discuss the koan and how it is related to this step. So we're going to take a little commercial break here and come back in a couple minutes, and we will resume. Thank you.
You are invited to participate in a true multimedia experience coming to a home near you. LCM TV is bringing Lake County into the new millennium with news, live broadcast, information, music, talk shows, and local programming, all streaming in high definition online and soon to be on your Roku box. Join us at lcm-tv.com or be a part of our studio audience. You can also watch the shows at lakecomagazine.com as we provide programming to inform, enlighten, and maybe even enrage you. On Lake County Magazine Talk Show with Terry and Pete the Tax Guy, Wednesday mornings at 9 a.m. Joni Lane brings a positive light to you every Monday at 3 p.m. Pasha Space brings an international flair as they discuss ecological, health, and social issues in Haiti with people around the world. End up your week with positive, conscious sounds on Saturday at 9 a.m. with Sister T on the Bridge. This show is also simulcast on KMEC 105.1 FM in Ukiah. Our latest show, LCM TV News, is brought to you live Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at noon, featuring national, regional, and local news, weather, and sports. We have it all here for you on your local TV station, LCM TV. Join us online and soon on Roku, giving you access to all the best Lake County has to offer. We are LCMTV.com, your multimedia connection. Tune in for the fun. It's live TV at its best.
Hi, and welcome back to Positive Light. I'm your host, Joni Lane. And before the break, we were talking about the 12 and Zen book written by Bill Crumbeen, and that we practice this various variations of it at our nonprofit in Kelseyville, A Positive Light Meditation Center. And going back to the graphic that we had up there, step 1, we were discussing the Zen practitioner 12-step 1, I guess is the way I want to say it. So again, these are based on the traditional AA steps. And the Zen practitioner step 1 was written by Bernie Glassman. The societal normal step 1 was written by Herb Echo Deer. I suggested that we look at these several times and find one that we could relate to. And I just randomly picked Zen practitioner because, for no reason. Any of them will work, whatever one you feel you can relate to at the time. But just for the sake of picking to pick one, I'm going to pick Zen practitioner. And we were discussing what I admitted I was powerless over means. When you admit you're powerless over anything, it is a humbling experience. Attachment to your ego and admitting that you're not in control of your actions because your ego is actually controlling you. Your need to be right, your need to have the last word, your need to continue to say what you're saying, even if you know you're not right, you're just that stubborn. Well, it's a huge step to admit that you're powerless over something, especially your ego. AA always says leave your ego at the door, and Buddhism says there's no room for ego. We all have ego, we just need to find a balance where it's healthy, where it's not ruling us, where we can admit we're wrong, where we can let other people be right. So this step is a really big deal. Just looking at the traditional AA step, I admitted I was powerless over alcohol, that my life had become unmanageable. That's a huge step. To admit that something else is controlling your life and that you cannot control it is an amazing thing to really accept, to really look at that. Now, after 5 to 10 minutes of meditating on one of these steps, all of this information starts to soak in. It starts to really get into our head about what it really means to admit something like this. And what Bill Crumbeen has done is he has paired each step with a Buddhist koan. And a koan is a story or a parable. And he has found over the years that some of the koans that his Zen masters have been teaching him definitely relate to some of the steps that he's been working on for the past 30 some odd years. And he's decided, since he can see the correlation, that he's written a book to help us see that we can deepen our relationship with our steps. So the koan that he's paired with this reads, "It is as though you were up a tree, hanging from a branch with your teeth. Your hands and feet can't touch any branch. Someone appears beneath the tree and asks, 'What is the meaning of Zen?' If you do not answer, you evade your responsibilities, which is discourteous. If you answer, you lose your life. What do you do?" Let's go over this a few times. And pretend we're meditating. I'm going to go through my meditation process with you. It's as though you were hanging up a tree from a branch with your teeth. Your hands and feet can't touch any branch. Someone appears beneath the tree and asks, "What is the meaning of Zen?" If you do not answer, you evade your responsibilities. If you do answer, you lose your life. What do you do? When you're talking about admitting your powerlessness over your attachment to your ego and not control your actions, can you relate that with this koan? It's as though you were hanging up a tree. It's as though you were hanging up a tree from a branch with your teeth. So there you are, hanging by a branch with your teeth, and your feet and your hands can't touch anything, and you're just hanging there. How is this anything to do with your ego? Well, you're not in control. You're not in control because you're hanging by a branch with your teeth. You can't reach anything. You can't grab the branch. You can't use your feet. You're powerless. Someone appears beneath the tree and asks, "What is the meaning of Zen?" Well, that could mean a lot of things. Could mean, what's the meaning of my ego? What's the meaning of needing to be in control of my ego? What's the meaning of needing to let go of the control of my ego? So you can see how this can kind of help you look at things a little deeper. If you don't answer, you evade your responsibilities. Well, when you're looking at admitting you're powerless over your attachment to your ego, are you evading your responsibilities? Or are you admitting you're powerless and being responsible? If you don't answer, you lose your life. What do? Well, if you continue to go down the road you're going, you're needing to have your ego run you, you're not really having a life. Are you actually living your life, or are you stuck in your ego? Is it that you have a life to lose? Do you have a life to lose if you're just stuck with your ego and you're not really allowing life on life's terms? So there's 100 questions that can come up. And I can't tell you how to relate to this koan. I can't tell you what the step means to you. But I can tell you that if there's 12 people in this group and we all look at these steps and we all meditate on them, we will all come up with something different. We will all come up with a different story the way we see it. And we learn a lot from each other. We learn what other people might suggest that never would have entered our mind. And of course, that depends on their day, their week, the mood they're in, what might have happened on the way to the meditation center. It's just every day it changes. But for the time that you're meditating on this, for the 10 minutes that you're meditating on this step and this koan, many, many things may open up for you. And it helps you really see what's going on. It helps you really experience your life in a different way, because you're going to look at things a little bit differently. So I'm going to ring my bell, and we're going to move our graphic and come back to me. So I hope you can see what I was trying to show you there. And it takes some practice of working on meditation, for one thing, and only thinking about the step that you've chosen. It takes some practice looking at a koan as something abstract that can mean many different things. There's no actual meaning to it. But by looking into the steps and the koans, you can awaken your mind and begin to think differently. By practicing meditation, you can begin to think outside of yourself and outside of your ego. And you can begin to think of how the things we do affect not only us, but others as well. So the more we do this and the more we practice, the more we gather insight into our behavior and how what we do affects others. So addicts generally have a very selfish behavior. We have these patterns of very self-serving behavior. We are the kings of ego and selfish needs, and we're often so busy whining because the world won't bend to our ways and the way we want things. We have these desires that the world should be a certain way, and life should just bend to the way we want it. And we fight it, and we fight it, and we fight it, and we get so mad because it just won't bend that we do things like we start drinking, or we start taking drugs, or we start yelling and becoming angry at other people. Simply because we can't accept life on life's terms, we still want it to go our way. That's probably the number one trait I can see with all addicts of any kind. We really don't want to give up on what we want and the way we want it, even if it's never going to be that way. So we're actually pounding our head against the wall and getting absolutely nowhere, but we'll keep doing it. You know, addicts are a great group of people because we're so unique, and we all think we're right, all of us. But this is where the serenity prayer really comes into play. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. That's a hard one. The courage to change the things I can, which is even harder, and the wisdom to know the difference, which is the hardest. I can tell you that when you ask for serenity to accept the things you can't change, it opens a door and allows you to just accept things. It's easier to just accept things. Sometimes, even though we want to change something, we don't have the courage to do it. But if we really want things to change, and we can change them, we have to step up and make the changes. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of courage. And whether that's in the world in general, or even harder in ourselves, it takes a lot of courage to make some changes. And it takes a lot of work. But gaining the wisdom to know the difference can only be gained by practicing those things. Practicing seeing if you can change something. Okay, I can't, I have to accept it. The more you practice that, the easier it is to see the wisdom in what you should or shouldn't do. But like everything, it takes practice before it starts making sense. And in order to become happy, peace-loving, content people, we need to remind ourselves that life goes the way it goes, whether we're here or not. If we step out of this world because we can't take it anymore, the world will continue to go on. It really won't have any effect on the world. We may hurt some people along the way, but they'll get over it. You know, a lot of people suffer from depression, which I've suffered with for years, and commit suicide. And I'll admit I've had some suicidal thoughts over the past 26 years, but it's been a long time because I've been practicing meditation and I've been practicing my steps. And the more I accept life on life's terms, the more I realize life is pretty good. I know of people who have committed suicide, and I feel really badly that they were suffering so much that they couldn't take it anymore. Some people committed suicide because they wanted to hurt someone, teach them a lesson. But it didn't work. they're still here living their life. The world still goes on. And you have just thrown your life away, which could have been better. So I'm telling you from my experience, because I've been there, that if you practice steps, whether they're AA or the societal normal or the Zen practitioner or any of the other thousands of steps, and you start accepting life on life's terms and start living fully instead of fighting it, you will find that you are much happier. If you put your ego outside the door, and you don't need to be right all the time, and you can just accept life as it is, good, bad, and otherwise, you'll start realizing life is pretty precious, and we can make every day better. There are things that we can do. And this is just one of the tools. This is one thing I can offer you that's a very powerful tool, but it does take effort. You do have to apply yourself. Not a whole lot, but a little. It's not magic. It doesn't just happen. One of the things that AA says is placing principles before personalities, which is accepting everyone for who they are, whether you like them or not, because you know we're all in the same boat. We're all in this together. None of us is getting out of this thing alive. So why not make the best of it, right? The next thing we're going to do, rather than me going on and on about this, is go to step 2. And I'm going to introduce my guest today, which is Pat Gleason. And Pat is not a recovering addict, and he's not in a current 12-step program, but he does come to the 12 and Zen every month because he gets something out of it personally. So can you give us a brief description of what you do get out of this?
Thank you for having me. And yeah, I get a lot out of it because I don't have a substance abuse problem. I never have. I've been able to stop anything I felt was harming me, but I do have a lot of the traits that people in the 12-step have. You know, the ego gets in my way. I need to be right. These types of things, and I mean, it's not a substance abuse problem. I think it's a humanity problem. It's something that we all deal with, and I find it much easier to deal with life on a daily basis, gaining the knowledge that I gain through the 12 and Zen program and the meditations that I've learned and experienced.
So yeah, it's more of just being human, isn't it? It's more of just dealing with life on life's terms and looking at the things the way they are. But of course, we all have a different relationship with our life than the next person does. And we all view things a little bit differently than the next person does. But we all have problems, and mostly they stem from our ego. So, Pat, let's take the step 2, and you and I can go over this, and Mark can put the graphic up on the screen for us so the audience can do this along with us. And we'll go ahead and I'm going to read them. I'm going to make a few suggestions. Pat, you've done this before, so I'm going to let you kind of go on your own on which step you'd like to choose. And when I'm done, I'll ring the bell, and then we can come back and discuss what we've come up with. So first, take a couple of deep breaths and get centered and relax. And reading the traditional AA Step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Zen Practitioner Step 2, I came to have faith in an enlightened way. Societal Normal Step 2, became willing to do these steps, believing we can heal if we do. Now I invite the audience to go ahead and look at the graphic on the screen and go over them until they find a step that they can relate to. And we'll play some gentle music, and I'm going to ask you to repeat that step and see how you might deepen that relationship with that step. What opens up for you? reading the koan, let's see how this can relate to the step you were just thinking about. This is the stone drenched in rain that points the way. This is the stone drenched in rain that points the way. Okay, well normally we'd probably meditate on this a little bit longer during the group, but just for today's purposes. So, Pat, why don't you go ahead and share with us which step you chose and what opened up for you and how the koan related to that.
I chose the Zen practitioner. I came to have faith in an enlightened way. And I chose it because I believe the enlightened way is gathering the strength within you to let go of the trivial things that drive you nuts during the daily life, and also gives you strength to accept the tragedies around you that happen to you, that happen to other people, and it teaches you that life will go on regardless. I mean, you're going to live it, and you have to learn to accept what you don't have power over.
Okay.
And then the koan kind of threw a stone in it. No way. I looked at it as that I'm the stone because I have to follow my path.
Ah.
So if I'm pointing my way, I'm going to go my way. And it relates to the koan because no matter which way your path is, you're still going to have to deal with the daily annoyances and the tragedies that are going to happen in your life and continue on. And that's basically what went on in my head.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So you were the stone.
Yes.
That's a really cool way of looking at it. And see, this is great because this is not at all what I was thinking. So thank you for opening up that vision for me, because that's something I wasn't looking at. But see how we learn from each other. And imagine if there was 12 people, we had 12 different versions of it. I chose the societal normal, which is unusual for me, but I thought I'd give it a shot today. Became willing to do these steps, believing we can heal if we do. And I was thinking, to become willing to do these steps or anything means I'm giving up my power, I'm giving up what I think I know, and I'm just blindly, with faith, going to follow these steps, believing I can heal if I do, because I've seen it work with others. So obviously there's something to this. When I think of became willing is a verb, it's an action, it's something that I had to put effort into. I became willing to do the steps. It didn't just happen. To believe in something is just faith, believing in something you can't see. Maybe it's a bit of hope mixed in there. This is a stone drenched in rain. I was thinking the steps were the stone. They were solid. There's something I could put my feet on. There's something that could support me during this process I'm not used to, this different thing I'm not used to. So the stone is something solid. Drenched in rain kind of brought the thought of clean, something new, something fresh. Rain cleans things. in my mind. So the stone being the step, drenched in rain, something fresh, something new, that points the way. That points the way would have something to do with me. I look at it as faith. Points the way. If I just do this on this solid thing, in this new, fresh way, it'll work. But a lot of this has to do with letting go of what we already thought we knew. Letting go of things that we might have already decided we made up our mind on. And Pat, when you're meditating on these things, do you feel that you're letting go of previous preconceived notions? Is something new opening up for you?
Every time. Every month when we do our 12 in Zen, I shed a little bit of something. And I gain a lot.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's what the whole process is about, is letting go and accepting.
And you've done this now, these 12 steps, how many times? 3 or 4 times now, haven't you?
3 or 4 times.
And
yeah.
is it different every time or the same?
It's different every time because sometimes I'll pick a different... It's like you did today, something that I normally don't pick, and I'll pick it because now I think in a different way each time. So if you stick to one thing every time, you'd get stuck in
right. So
whatever your thought is.
it's part of the growth process, opening up, doing something new, adding something more.
Correct.
Maybe a new door opens up that you didn't know was there.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here today to give us a different perspective, because all I have is my perspective, and I know people appreciate other